Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the webinar, Gaining Control, How Accreditation Empowers You to Manage Your Own Corporate Safety Program. Okay, so just some quick introductions. I'm Nancy Murray, Marketing Manager with Dynamisk. With me today is John Jones. He's our Regulatory Inspections Manager, and Kim Bai, who is our Regulatory Inspections Assistant Manager. They're going to be introducing themselves in a little bit more detail in a minute here. I'm just going to do a quick overview of Dynamisk before we get into things. So we are a Canadian corporation established in 2006. We have office locations in Calgary and in Sherwood Park. And we provide fully integrated lifecycle solutions for instrumentation, controls, and electrical. So on the screen right now, you're seeing a summary of the services that we provide. But we can do full life cycle for all phases of the project, from engineering right through to fabrication, construction, inspections, commissioning, and maintenance. Just a couple of logistics before we get rolling with the webinar. So your cameras are turned off, microphones are turned off. We will have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So if you do want to ask a question, there's a Q&A button at the top of your screen. You can just click on that, type your question in, and you can feel free to type questions in at any point during the webinar. And then at the end, once the presentation is finished, we'll have a chance to go through and have those questions answered. There will also be a recording of the webinar, and you'll get a link to it. It'll be emailed to you afterwards. And this webinar also qualifies for professional development credit with various technical associations. So you will receive a certificate of completion as well that you'll be able to include in your PD records. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kim and John.
Thank you, Nancy.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Gaining Control, How Accreditation Empowers You to Manage Your Own Corporate Safety Program. And we'll start with some introductions.
Good afternoon. My name is John Jones. I'm the Regulatory Inspections Manager at Dynamisk. I've been for approximately 12 years. I have been in this industry, what I feel like is a very long time, 45 years in the field, mainly technical. I'm a master electrician, field safety representative, FSR in British Columbia, electrical safety codes officer, and petroleum engineering. And as you'll notice on the screen, there's a journeyman refrigeration mechanic, which has no bearing on this whatsoever, but that's part of my background. So we'll move on. Kim?
Hey, hi, I'm Kim Bai, and I'm Dynamisk's Regulatory Inspections Assistant Manager. I work alongside John in managing our inspections group here. My duties include scheduling, assisting the inspectors with reporting, managing our compliance monitoring system, and training for that as well. I'm an engineering design and drafting technologist, and I was an electrical designer drafter for many years before moving into the inspection group here about 11 years ago. So here's a quick look at Dynamisk's inspection services. We have a team of 8 certified safety codes officers. We are accredited in 4 disciplines: electrical, gas, building, and plumbing. And to date, we've performed about 15,000 regulatory and QA/QC inspections throughout Alberta, BC, some in Saskatchewan, and we've been overseas. Today, our webinar is outlined as follows: what is accreditation, why be accredited, and why hire an accredited agency to do your inspections. So on to our first topic, what is accreditation?
I will lead into that with an explanation of accreditation. Initially, the accreditation program was actually called First Rights, and it was developed by the Alberta government in an effort to move away from managing regulatory inspections and privatize the industry. The first setup, or the first, I guess, the initiation of this was back in the early 90s when they developed the First Rights program and offered to the corporations and municipalities the opportunity to generate and manage their own programs and take care of their regulatory inspections, any safety related portions of their electrical program. And I say electrical at the first because initially that was the easiest discipline for accreditation to sort of take a foothold on. That was the discipline that offered the most in way of savings, and all corporations needed that. So as we get into it later on, it developed into all disciplines, but initially that was the start. So they developed what was called actually the Safety Codes Act. And that act was developed to provide guidance for the corporations and municipalities on how they would develop their programs. The focus was on safety, but it was based on current codes and standards. The program was designed to capture all regulatory and again, focus on safety, but being truthful, the province was looking forward to the privatization because it gave them a chance to move away from having to manage that regulatory program and the cost that incurred. The programs were specific to each corporation or municipality. It developed into what needed to be called a quality management plan in order for each corporation, each municipality to build a plan that worked for them, that was specific to their needs, and it gave them direction on how they would proceed with the regulatory program as it was. So where agencies fit into all of this, as the training was developed and the QMPs were designed, that QMP had to be vetted through the government, of course, but it did give direction on exactly how your program should look. And in this case, or in the beginning, First Rights, most corporations chose to be accredited in the electrical discipline. Reason being, all corporations needed electrical. It was a low-hanging fruit. There were options there that could save you money. It was easy to manage. And as I mentioned, every corporation and every municipality needed that. So as it moved forward, the QMPs were developed. They were vetted with the Safety Codes Council, and it provided guidance and clear direction for any corporation on and how they should proceed with their electrical safety plan. And again, I referred to electrical because it was the originator of the program. Almost every corporation that signed on took electrical first. Later in life, there were many of the corporations that expanded into different disciplines. They saw benefit there as well, and we'll get into a lot of those benefits as we go through, but initially that was the first and foremost discipline that each corporation wanted to be part of. So as you're building your QMP, it gives you direction on how you're going to manage your regulatory inspections, the training that's required, how you're going to keep your records. It basically is a book or a guideline that's very specific on how you need to run your program. And that was critical because in order to move forward, you had to know that what you were doing, first of all, was going to be safe. Second of all, it was going to be code compliant, and it needed to be repeatable. So all of that had to revert back to the Safety Codes Act, which was a government issued document that sort of outlined what you needed to do, first of all, to even be part of this program. So that was very important and critical to the development of all the QMPs. So based on that, there were initially four main objectives to the Safety Codes Act, and that was to train workers in a safe and competent manner, take steps to prevent injury, to consult with workers and their representatives over OH&S matters, which was very important because it was kind of the blending of these two documents, to give power to the inspectors to visit workplaces, investigate incidents, enforce legislative provisions. And aside from that, it was developed to largely pull all the disciplines together, to give it a guideline on how you would manage the entire program. The main objective of the Safety Codes Act was to provide that guidance to all disciplines one method for safety, even though several different disciplines were involved. So it was a uniform program that everybody could get on board with and virtually had the same direction. And that direction was now that you had to design your QMP to match how you wanted your particular corporation and municipality to operate. And at the beginning, well, not at the beginning, there is 3 different QMP plans. And all of those QMP documents bear evidence of the terms and conditions of the accreditation, what you need to do to be part of it, the scope and administration, the operational requirements. Keep in mind that the QMP is in fact a legally binding document. And to that end, upper management, senior upper management had to actually sign off on a QMP in order to validate it and be accepted by the Safety Codes Council. So it initiated and showed the buy-in of all the corporations on how they were going to deal with being accredited, what that meant, and the fact that they would follow the guidelines basically to the letter, because it is a legally binding document. So there were, at the start, 3 different types of QMPs: municipality, corporate, and agency. When you're dealing with municipal and corporate QMPs, they're virtually the same document because they were designed for the corporation more than anything else. And a municipality is in fact a corporation under a different name, virtually. The agency's QMP was significant to them because it gave them credibility. It showed that there were the conflict of interest issues were covered. Because in essence, when an agency goes to work, they're working for the corporation or the municipality and they're utilizing their QMP. But in order to be, I guess, recognized, that they had to generate their own QMP. It's a significant document, and again, it's signed off by senior management of the agency. When this came up, when we first were discussing this, the fact that you build a really specific and well-designed QMP to start with, because that is going to be your direction, your plan to go forward on all your facilities, all the cost savings you're trying to build into it, all of that becomes representative of the QMP, and it can be utilized anywhere. So when we first got involved with this, you develop a really concise QMP for Alberta, and you sort of run by those guidelines. Then you realize there's cost savings. There's such an advantage to having a design that's repeatable that you now saw benefits also in moving across to other areas. For example, like perhaps move into Saskatchewan. You have facilities there. And even though you're not the authority having jurisdiction, which will get much explanation later on, even though you're not regulated in that province, you have brought in a program that is code compliant, has been proven. And so when you're sort of managing your assets with that, the province saw benefit to that as well. There's never been any pushback from Saskatchewan as the example because they had the ability to audit. They were still being paid the permit fees, and everything in the program worked as it did in Alberta, but only now it's being moved to Saskatchewan. So you had a safe and usable program to execute your regulatory inspections.
So now we move to our next topic, why be accredited?
As I mentioned at the very beginning, there had to be significant benefit for the corporations and the municipalities to move in this direction. And we'll try to identify what those benefits were. Initially, one of the key benefits was obviously the ability to direct your QMP program or your electrical safety or whatever discipline you're dealing with. It was your program, and this allowed you the option to do that. And what was required from there were obviously all the tools that you needed to implement it, to direct it as a safety program, how to deal with regulatory inspections, how you're going to interpret all the different codes and standards. All of that was sort of the guidelines built into the QMP program, and the fact that you were moving toward accreditation allowed you to build this program and actually implement it across all of your facilities. That was kind of a key important role for this. And it started to allow you to have a consistent approach to all of your regulatory requirements. You had a consistent approach now to code interpretations across all of your disciplines. It gave you an opportunity in this case now to contract with an agency who, when working for you, will become the authority having jurisdiction. The benefit of that, of course, is each and every time they go to inspect for you, you're going to get a consistent interpretation. The way it's managed will be repeatable. And once you're the authority having jurisdiction, regardless of what municipality you're working in, the accreditation takes control, and they're the final authority on how decisions are made, code, how things are interpreted. That becomes key to the fact that now each and every time you go out to run your program, it will be the same, your approach will be the same, and everyone knows what to expect, which can be a huge benefit in the end when each and every inspection turns out virtually the same way. Not the same non-compliances, obviously, but they're implemented the same way. Oops. Then we move forward into the permitting fees. Part of the whole program was the elimination of standard permit fees. So as an accredited corporation, you're running your own program. The permit, or that term permit, actually sort of rolls back into the plan review. If you weren't working as an accredited corporation, there would be a plan review required, but then there'd be permit fees on top of that. In this case, the plan review is interpreted as the project kickoff. It is, in fact, the permit to proceed. So that's the name permit for it, but there are no fees. As an accredited corporation, you're paying for your agency to implement that. They're giving you direction. Everything's basically under the standard format, but it's not directed through the municipality, and you're not paying in addition for that. It's just your hourly cost of service coming into play to generate your schedule and your, I guess, progression for the project. One of the other key points in the permit fees, if you're in building mode and in your multidiscipline, for example, the fees for, say, a building permit on a large project can be extremely high, extremely expensive. I mean, as an agency, we dealt with clients where the building permits were in excess of $500K a year. So that alone, moving to accreditation, gave them a cost saving right up front that was pretty difficult to turn down. So this applies to all permit fees because you're no longer obligated to pay that to the municipality. So there's a cost saving there that's realized. Now, if you're not in building mode, if you're just running day-to-day maintenance category 1, the permit fee type situation is a wash. It doesn't cost you money, you don't lose money. So it does pay off in a big way when you're in a project build mode. Another key benefit is your standard reporting. You build a program through your QMP. There's regulations that says what you need to do for reporting, how you have to manage the history, all of that. But now that you're involved as an accredited corporation with an agency, as an example, you've developed a standard format for your reporting. All the applicable code rules and standards that are involved with your regulatory program are identified. You're basing your reporting and you're identifying each of those issues in the reporting, and you now have the ability to track that reporting, maintain it. You will move into the fact that you have facility history now based on all the reporting that you captured and the direction you continue to move. So, and again, we're moving forward into the facility history, which has become a key point for most corporations. The QMP decided or built the requirements for the Safety Codes Council to be able to identify and track your facility history. All the reports are stored, they're accessible. Anytime there is the potential for an audit, the agency becomes a key contributor to that. Because of the history, they can identify annually all the reporting, all the work that's taken place, determine the effectiveness of the program itself based on the history. And one of the other key, I guess, products from being able to manage your history like that is the ability to actually track contractor performance. And that does become a key issue if you're starting to see repeatable non-compliances through any particular contractor. Once you start to sort of build a bit of a database on that and you show that you're starting to see this over and over again, now you need to make some decisions. Are you going to better train the contractor or perhaps even move to another contractor? Regardless, you have the ability to do that now that you are tracking all of the findings from your regulatory inspection reports. One of the other next best benefits to the accreditation program is the ability for additional cost savings. And that is based on the ability to implement a project variance. And we're showing on the screen one of the most, I guess, often used variances, which is random cable tray fill. Right away, you have the ability to save cost in the fact that you're not derating, you're not having to purchase additional cable sizes, all the sort of things that a variance will cover. You have immediate cost savings based on the fact that you can implement variances. And this is just one example. There are several. And once the corporation has taken over and the proper engineering has taken place to prove out that the variance is equal to or better than, and we all know that description for what a variance needs to be, then those cost savings can be implemented to any given project. Now we move forward to the benefit of having a relationship with an agency and having a contracted rate. The obvious benefit right away is the ability to do clear budgeting. But the fact is, with a contracted rate, and sometimes those are negotiated in detail to provide the MSA that we operate under, but you've built a relationship with the agency, you know what it's going to cost you every time they go out. You have basically an annual report showing what that uncovered or what that entailed, and it allows you to do a clear budget for the following year and just to manage your program and know exactly what it's costing you each and every time. So now we're moving into having jurisdiction, the authority having jurisdiction.
So the authority having jurisdiction is the organization responsible for enforcing the minimum requirements of codes and standards. Corporations that are not accredited are, for lack of better words, at the mercy of the authority having jurisdiction, which in this case I'm referring to municipalities. Generally, municipalities are risk adverse. They typically adhere to the code word for word and will not consider a risk-based approach to facility inspections. Their approach is prescriptive and there is no room for code interpretation. It may also be difficult to obtain a code variance. And in some situations, you may end up with an inspector at your site that has never been to a facility like yours before, so they don't have the expertise needed. Say, for instance, if they're inspecting at a hazardous location and they don't have any experience with that. Being accredited allows a corporation to have a certain level of risk. They can build their own program and designs focused on safety and also on costs. An example of this would be if a corporation is constructing multiple well sites throughout the year and they're all of the same compliant design, they have the option to have only 50% of those installations inspected. And that, of course, would save on project costs. But of course, if there are a lot of non-compliances popping up during the inspection of that 50%, the contracted inspection agency can choose to inspect more well sites. And also being accredited means that you can contract an agency that fits your industry. So a legal requirement of a QMP is to report all incidents. The contracted agency will take the initiative to investigate the incident and submit relevant documentation to the government on behalf of the corporation. An agency's compliance monitoring system can help manage this data. And here's just some examples of incidents. These are electrical related, but we have arc flash, a cable strike from somebody that was boring and didn't know where the lines were, and then an example of an overhead line strike. So our next topic is why use an accredited inspection agency. So a properly experienced accredited agency will offer a corporation a turnkey solution. The agency looks after all aspects of regulatory compliance, and that starts with helping the corporation apply for its accreditation. You want to find a certified agency that has the expertise for your specific industry, and that can be oil and gas, mining, manufacturing, pulp and paper, grain transportation. There are many industries that can benefit from accreditation. An accredited corporation must have a contract in place with an agency. That is a QMP requirement. And by doing that, it eliminates the potential for conflict of interest. A corporation that would use its in-house SCOs to inspect its own work would generally be considered a conflict of interest. So you'd hire an agency to come in as a third party to perform those inspections for you. In some cases, a corporation may choose to contract more than one agency in order to fulfill its compliance and expertise needs. And that can also afford those agencies the opportunity to share their resources to meet that corporation's compliance needs as well. And the agency is responsible for maintaining its SCOs, training, and certifications, and that comes at no cost to the corporation. The corporation does not have to manage any of that information. That's a QMP requirement of the agency, and they have to prove to the corporation that they are up to date and that their safety codes officers are all qualified. An agency will also offer consistent code interpretation. Its teams and inspectors will work together to decide on how to call a certain code violation, and that way there are no disagreements and the corporation will get a unified approach to its facilities. Another benefit of contracting an agency is inspection scheduling. As an accredited corporation, you're in control of your schedule and the timing of your inspections. And by contracting the agency, you're essentially turning that responsibility over to the agency. This proves especially useful when it comes to inspecting packaged equipment. The corporation doesn't have to pay permit fees for shop inspections, and the agency is generally in contact with the vendors to inspect at their shop. And that allows a vendor to turn out a compliant product for shipping to site, because we know how expensive it is to make corrections in the field. So this ensures a cost-effective way to fix deficiencies before a skid is transported. And the agency will also offer the use of a compliance monitoring system, which is a great tool for tracking the life of a corporation's facilities. It provides a quick snapshot on which facilities are compliant and which have outstanding non-compliant items. Or there may be a drawing review that the inspection hasn't happened for, and it allows the agency to follow up the corporation to see if they're ready for inspection. So with a compliance monitoring system, or CMS for short, every record of inspection is stored in one place. It's a great tool for tracking information on what the most non-compliances are that are being found, or how effective a contractor is that's doing all their installations. A compliance monitoring system is also a great place to store your project-specific code variances. It's a great tool for managing incidents. You can always go back and look at inspection history, site photos, and that can prove helpful during an investigation. If a corporation has facilities across the country where there are multiple authority having jurisdictions, they can choose to store their information in one spot like a CMS, and that makes for easy KPI and statistical compliance reporting. And of course, the CMS is a great tool for regulatory audits. A CMS program will give you it's a secure program that gives you audit level recall. Access to a CMS is typically read-only for anyone outside the agency's administration. The Safety Codes Council requires a corporation to produce compliance stats annually, and there's also a requirement for an external audit every 3 years. So by having a compliance monitoring system in place, it allows for very easy recall of historical information when the auditor asks you to produce it. If you need to show how many Cat 1 inspections you did last year, it's right there at your fingertips. And your facility structure is there, your agency contract, your Q&P documents can be stored there. It really is a great audit tool. In the end, what it really comes down to is, as an accredited corporation, even though there are substantial cost savings to managing your own Q&P program, the primary objective will always be safety first. And that concludes our webinar.
All right, thanks, Kim and John. That was really informative. So as I mentioned at the beginning, if you do have any questions, just click on the little Q&A icon at the top of your screen, and you can type your question in on the side there, and then I can read them out for John and or Kim to answer. So we'll give you a minute to do that. I do have a couple questions that came up in a previous session, so maybe I'll ask those now, and then that'll give you time to type in any additional questions. So the first question is, you've talked about Category 1 and Category 2 inspections. So as an agency, do you do Part 1 and Part 2 inspections? Does Dynamis do both?
Actually, we do not. We have access to make that happen for our clients. We are a CEC, in this case, Part 1 inspection agency. Part 1 is the installation portion of the code. Part 2 is the actual standards to which all devices and equipment are built. That's a separate code altogether, and it is administered by a different group than us. There's a lot of correlation between the two because we're inspecting the installation of the equipment, where Part 2, as I mentioned, is the design of that equipment. So we interact with a different agency if we need that level of certification for our clients.
Okay. Another question, how do you ensure the security of my data if you're using the CMS?
So CMS applications say, for instance, for Dynamis, like our application is built on Microsoft Azure platform. So it's, it's a secure platform. Our data is backed up regularly. It's in the cloud. It's basically, it's safe. Building burns down, you're not going to lose your data. You're not dealing with any boxes or files. It's a secure database. Yeah.
Okay. We don't have any other questions coming in at this point, so maybe we'll just wrap things up. I will mention again that you will be receiving a certificate of completion for your PD records, and I'll also be making a recording of this webinar available to you. You'll get a link in your email so you can come back at any time and watch it again or pick up specific pieces that you maybe missed the first time around. There's a lot of information presented here, so you might find it useful to be able to go back and watch again. Anyway, so we'll wrap that up for today. Thanks, everyone, very much for joining us this afternoon, and enjoy the rest of your day.